Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the Mookse and the Gripes bucket list book tag. This tag was created by SHAWN the Book Maniac, and it was inspired by a literary website called the Mookse and the Gripes, who, in addition to having a website, they also have a podcast, which I will link down below. Which I will link down below, along with SHAWN the Book Maniac's disclaimer. At the beginning of his video introducing this tag, he has a bit of a disclaimer explaining and asking people who do this tag to include this references to the Mookse and Gripes website as well as their podcast. I checked out the website and it seems to be pretty cool. I didn't look into in depth, and the I tried to listen to one of the podcasts and it didn't quite work for me, but I'm going to try to give it another go at some point when I have the time. I am swamped with BookTube videos, which is what happens when Big Brother is on and also football season. So my BookTube watching might suffer. But anyway, let's get to the bucket list. So, a bucket list is a list of things you would like to do before you kick the bucket. I initially had quite a bit of trouble with this tag because I'm like, well, I don't really think in terms of bucket lists and that sort of thing. But then as I got going, I added more and more books to the list that I actually would like to read before I kick the bucket. Some of them are long-running desires. Some of them are perhaps nowadays more nostalgia fuel than anything else. Some are more practical. So there aren't going to be a lot of classics, a lot of like the usual types of books you will see on a bucket list. But I ended up coming up with 15 books. So let's get started. And I will try to organize them a bit more than I have on my written list. So we'll start with the classics. And by classics, I do mean the literature of ancient Greece and Rome. So the first book on my list is A True Story by Lucian of Samosata. A True Story is a Roman novel that in intent parodies the adventure literature of the period, but is now widely recognized as the first science fiction novel. A lot of the elements in the novel, while obviously fantasy, are elements that you would identify with science fiction novel, particularly the science fiction novels that were popular in the early 20th century. Sort of like, say, the Barsoom novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs and pretty much a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs' stuff. Planetary Romance, that kind of thing. And I've been wanting to read A True Story for ages. I've also wanted to read the Dionysiaca by Nonnus. The Dionysiaca is an epic poem, I think, that tells the story of Dionysus, the Olympian god of wine and grape cultivation and theater and madness and revelry. And I've been wanting to read that one for a while. So, moving to some more classics, but this time Asian classics, I also would like to read eventually The Tale of Genji by Lady Murasaki Shikibu. The Tale of Genji is the adventures of a Japanese prince, and I've wanted to read it for ages. And I've been meaning to pick it up, but I've never gotten around to it. Another classic of Asian literature, in this case China, is The Journey to the West by Wang Cheng'en. The Journey to the West is a very popular novel. It's the story of a monk accompanied by the Monkey King and a few other acolytes going from China to India to gain possession of, I think, Buddhist text. And on the way, they get into all sorts of adventures. Sticking with China, I would also like to read To Destroy the 11th Sun by Gulong. I've read The 11th Sun by Gulong. It is one of my favorite wuxia novels. And I think the only one by Gulong that has been translated. But I'm going to look into that. But I would love to see more of Gulong's work translated. I would also love to see or to read the rest of the Condor Heroes trilogy. The first book in the trilogy, The Legend of the Condor Heroes, has just recently finished publication, but the other 2 volumes or 2 novels in the series have yet to be translated, and I'm not entirely sure if they are or not, but I would love to see them translated. So yeah, and I would love to see more wuxia novels translated too, because they're very interesting what I've read so far. I don't know why, particularly like American science fiction publishers haven't published some of them. But anyway, I would also like to read, moving back to Japan, the Sea of Fertility tetralogy by Yukio Mishima. I've been wanting to read more of Mishima's work for ages, and I think the Sea of Fertility would be a good place to start. Moving on to more nostalgia for me is The Ants by E.O. Wilson and Bert Holldobler. The Ants is an encyclopedic look at the ant world, at various species of ants, and I've wanted to read this book since the mid-90s. So in the mid-90s, when I was in my early teens, I wanted to be a scientist, namely a zoologist, entomologist, something like that. And I actually had a few books in that vein from Dover. I had like a book on ferns, a book on some kind of hawks, spiders, and parasites. And I don't have any of them anymore, and I never actually got around to reading them, except for the fern book. I think I started that one. But yeah, I think in this case it's one of those things that it's something left unfinished that I really would like to read this book at last, and maybe eventually track down the ones that I had ages ago that I don't remember. Moving to some fiction, I'd like to read Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I read very little of Virginia Woolf's work, Mrs. Dalloway, the main one. But I remember watching Orlando when the movie version and really wanting to read the book. I'd also like to read Red Doc by Anne Carson. I love Anne Carson's earlier work, Autobiography of Red, which is the story of a modernized Gerion and his relationship with Heracles. I loved that poem. It's a poetic novel. And about 10 years ago, Anne Carson wrote a sequel called Red Doc, which looks at Gerion and Heracles as older people, as adults. And I've wanted to read Red Doc for ages. I would also like to read Agatha Christie's autobiography. I read her memoir, Come Tell Me How You Live, which is about her experiences helping her husband, Max Mallowan, who was an archaeologist, during his digs in eastern Syria in the I think late 20s or early 30s, which was incredibly fascinating, and I would like to read her autobiography eventually. Also, and this is probably an example of me being completely insane, is at some point I would like to read the whole of the Norton Anthology of Theory and Criticism. Yeah. I would also like to eventually get around to reading Dessert Person by Claire Safitz. It's a cookbook that I've wanted to I mean, it came out last year, but I really, really want to read it. And then also have a let me see. So my list I just put as pastel, but the proper title is Pure Pastel, Contemporary Works by Today's Top Artists, by Anne Heavener. This is a look at a number of contemporary pastel artists and their work, and I have wanted it for ever since I saw the book, and I haven't gotten around to it yet, largely because it is insanely expensive. And I've just recently really felt the urge to really get back into painting pastels. So, yeah. And finally, going back to Japan, I would like to read, or really want to read, Manga in Theory and Practice by Hirohiko Araki. He is the creator of the manga series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Manga in Theory and Practice is his sort of book on manga and how to write it and that sort of thing. And I'm very curious to read it and learn a bit more about how manga is created and sort of what goes into creating manga, not only on the art side but on the storytelling side. So that's my list of the my bookish bucket list. If I'm a bit rushed and not as like loquacious or as in depth in my explanations, I'm sorry. My 2 nieces and 2 nephews, the 4 children of the apocalypse, will be coming in the next few minutes. So I'm going to get ready for them to come over. I don't know if I'm watching them for any length of time or if it's just a visit. And yeah, I'd like to get this uploaded before they come. Also, if the video quality is a little too dark, I'm going to try to fix it, but it's probably going to be dark for a bit because one of my lights went out in my ceiling fan light fixture. Even though it's like on the furthest side of the camera, it's like the one that's next to the wall. It kind of makes everything a little bit darker. So I'm going to try to fix that up. And of course that means ordering in a new light, which is a pain in the butt because those lights are so hard to find. But anyway, BookTube, I'm starting to ramble and I really need to get this uploaded. So tomorrow will be the O tag, and then Wednesday and Thursday will probably be some more tags because there are quite a few tags that have come out the last few days that I really want to do, and I'm looking forward to doing them. And yeah, if you have the time, do check out the Mookse and Gripes website and their podcast. I'm sure I will definitely be looking into the podcast, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. So anyway, BookTube, thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.